Hello, long time no see. If you've been paying attention, this is the second video this week. And I know I've been bad for releasing videos on time, but it's been hard to find the time. I've just been so busy. But anyways, today we are doing what I like to call the poor man's brisket, which is a bottom blade roast, and we're gonna be cooking it over an open fire all day. It's gonna be consisted of maple wood. It's a nice light wood. It's great for beef, chicken, pork, fish, you name it. We're gonna cook it way past well done. We're gonna cook it to the temperature of about 200 to 210 degrees Fahrenheit. It's gonna be nice and tender and juicy, and to go along with it, we're gonna do some roasted potatoes with fresh herbs, a spinach, tomato, mushroom kind of dish at the end. So please stay tuned, and you're not gonna wanna miss this. It's gonna be absolutely delicious. Let's get started.
Here I have a AAA grade bottom blade roast. These roasts are perfect for slow cooking as they have a lot of intramuscular fat, or should I say marbling. The bottom blade is a tough cut of meat and should be cooked nice and slow. As with most tough cuts, it should be cooked to an internal temperature of around 200 to 210 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll start by searing the cut all the way around and smoke it the rest of the way. But before I do that, I'm actually going to dry brine this in the fridge overnight. So I'm going to season it with salt, pepper, and garlic plus seasoning. Which, Clubhouse, if you're listening, please sponsor me. I'm going to do this for all sides while patting the seasoning in so it sticks. Make sure you roll the roast across the cutting board as you don't want to waste any seasoning that comes off. Once it's seasoned, you're going to want to transfer it onto a rack so air can fully go around the roast. The reason why I dry brine it overnight is so I can get a great sear on it and the seasoning has some time to absorb into the meat. Fast forward to the next day, and I'm going to get started on some roasted herb potatoes. Today I'm going to be using red potatoes just because that's all I had laying around the house, but for best results, I would recommend using baby potatoes, as they produce a crispier end result. Try to keep your pieces as even in size as possible so they cook at the same rate. Transfer the pieces into a bowl and then fill up that bowl with cold water and let the potatoes soak for an hour, as that removes some of the starch and makes the potatoes fluffier. And now it's time to let them soak. Time to get on to the herb portion of our herb potatoes. I'll be using some fresh basil, oregano, and thyme leaves. And if you don't got time for fresh herbs, then use dried spices, of course. I'll stack the leaves on top of each other, roll them together, and then chiffonade them. Whenever I'm cutting fresh leaves, I'll always chiffonade them as it reduces the amount of flavor left on the cutting board. I'll gather the herbs into a bowl and set off to the side as I get to work on these oregano leaves. And of course, I'm going to chiffonade these as well. I like doing these kinds of clips because then I get to say the word chiffonade. You know, I feel like it's a word not said enough. Chiffonade. And with the thyme, what we're going to do is we're actually going to pluck off the leaves individually from the stems, because you're not going to want any stems in this bowl by the time you're done plucking the leaves off. If you haven't already poured yourself a glass of wine, now is the time to do it. I'm going to set these off to the side, and now I'm going to get started on my green onions. I'm going to start off with 2 stalks of green onions, as one will be for my potatoes and the other one will be for my spinach and tomatoes. With that done, I'm now going to set these off to the side and I'm going to start drying out my potatoes. It's been an hour since these guys have been soaking, so now I'm going to bring in a towel and I'm going to transfer my potatoes from the bowl onto the towel. You're going to want to get those potatoes as dry as possible so that way the oil can fry these potatoes in the oven. Any moisture will hinder this. If you don't want to use a towel, then paper towels work just fine. Once the potatoes are dry, we're going to now transfer it to a dry bowl. Because if your bowl isn't dry, then this would have been all for nothing. Because remember, we need to get rid of all the moisture that we possibly can. Since these will be going into the oven at about 450, I'll be using a high heat oil like avocado oil, about 3 tablespoons worth. I'll drizzle on all my green onions, and then all my herbs, and of course I'm going to season with some black pepper, salt, and then I'm going to mix thoroughly within the bowl. This part gets messy, so if you have any gloves, I suggest putting them on as your hands are going to be super oily. Once they're all mixed, we're going to put them onto a baking sheet. If you have a rack to put the potatoes on, I suggest using that, but since I don't, I'll be flipping these at the halfway point. And even though I've already seasoned them, I'm going to go ahead and season them just a little bit more. And if you think I'm bad with salt and pepper, you should see what your local restaurant is putting in your food. And now I'll put these in the oven at 450 for 35 minutes. And now it's time to get started on our spinach, mushrooms, and tomatoes. We'll start off by cutting these mushrooms the only way I know how, one at a time. One day I'll figure out a faster way, and I can guarantee you that day is not today. And then I'll grab some cherry tomatoes and I'll be cutting them into quarters, and just like the mushrooms, these will also be one at a time. Once all the cherry tomatoes are cut, we're going to set them off to the side and worry about our spinach now. Now what may look like a lot of spinach is actually, in most cases, not enough, so don't be afraid to use as much as you want. When you cook spinach, it actually reduces to about an eighth of its size. I'll now get my pan nice and hot and put in some olive oil so that way we can saute. Once I start sauteing my tomatoes, I'm going to start adding some salt so that way it draws out some moisture. After a few minutes, I'll then add in my mushrooms. Once they're about halfway done, then I'll start adding in my green onions. Once the green onions are nice and fragrant, I will finally add in the spinach. Once your spinach is wilted, it is now ready to eat. And now back to our roast. This is what it looks like after a day in the fridge, and now it's time to set up our smoker.
10 hours later, we have this magnificent roast, all cut up, juicy, tender, flavorful. Smoke flavor is so pronounced. Because I did have a piece before, I couldn't resist. I'll have another one right now. Oh, that's good. If you haven't tried smoking anything with just wood, you gotta try it. Because, you know, I'm a big charcoal guy, but this is better. Give it a shot. If you like this video, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.